We have had some wise teachers to help us understand clinging and aversion. 4 of these teachers, Dr. Seth Zueho Segal, Venerable Dehong, Mary Stankiewicz, and Dave Smith, helped us understand the ins and outs of clinging and attachment, the reality of the human experience, and reminders of the way out of suffering. Hi, it's Margaret Maloney, and welcome to Season 3 of the Death Dhamma podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so appreciative that you are part of my community. And yet, I seek not to be attached to the idea of the podcast or even to the idea of our community. And that's our topic this season: attachment, clinging, and aversion. What happens when we really want something? What happens when we really don't want something? And what does it do to our suffering and dissatisfaction? Let's dive in and find out a little bit more with today's episode. We've been in a bit of a flow on Season 3 of the Death Dhamma podcast. First, interviewing wise teachers and learning about their experiences with clinging and craving and aversion. And what was it they clung to or tried to stay away from? And they brought us real life stories and deeper understandings. And then the week after an interview, I would go into the Pali Canon and look for some relevant teachings and discuss them in context to maybe 1 or 2 of the key points that our teacher brought us. And then the week following that would be the journaling episode, where I would share with you my own aha moments and life experiences and, mistakes that I've made, with the idea that I hope that, you're journaling and opening up your thoughts and minds and hearts to the teachings that have been brought our way. So what does all that mean? Why am I saying all of this? Because it means that this episode is one of those Pali Canon teaching episodes. Let's revisit some of the teachings and bring them together and see how it lands. Here we are, close to the end of Season 3 of the Death Dhamma podcast. Soon, I will go on hiatus. So be sure to send your ideas and questions for Season 4. Where should we go next? What topic will best support our journey? I'd love to hear from you, because right now, Season 4 is a completely blank, unrecorded audio, unwritten page. It can be whatever we want it or need it to be. So please feel free to send those ideas to info@margaretmaloney.com, meloni.com. And that would be so helpful, because I do want to continue, and I would love for us to move forward with the Season 4. But now, let's consider the teachings from the Pali Canon that support what we've been talking about and support what our wise teachers have been explaining to us. And specifically, I was trying to look back and think about the teachings that were paired up with the various teachers. And last week, when we did our collective wisdom episode, we looked at or listened to 4 different teachers. And so my thought was, well, let's go back and see what teachings were paired with those 4 different teachers. Because as you now know, we've had a whole season on attachment, and there's a lot. And I don't know that we have exhausted the topic, but gosh, I really appreciate that you've stuck with me and we've done a lot of work here. Okay, so let's circle back to craving and dukkha, tanha and dukkha, and the second noble truth. There is suffering, and we suffer because, why do we suffer? Clinging, attachment, and aversion, right? Clinging and craving and attachment. So here is a passage from the Dhammapada. If this sticky, uncouth craving overcomes you in the world, your sorrows grow like wild grass after rain. If in the world you overcome this uncouth craving, hard to escape, sorrows roll off you like water beads off of a lotus. Remember, it says hard to escape, all right? It's the nature of being human to face this kind of suffering. This is why the Buddha taught it to us. It's not because he thought it was uncommon. He felt like this was the condition that was what we were all plagued with. And he was trying to teach all of us the release from suffering. So here's another passage. If the roots remain undamaged and strong, a tree, even if cut, will grow back. So too, if latent craving is not rooted out, the suffering returns again and again. Not to be discouraging, but a good reminder, most of us don't just sit down and do one, really good meditation combined with one really good learning from a great teacher, and then bam, that's it. No more suffering for us. There are stories of such individuals, but they're not the majority of us. This is not easy. This stuff is difficult. And, remember, if your cravings control you, you will experience much sorrow. If you control your cravings, you will have less difficulty, because this isn't a promise that if you conquer cravings, you will never have difficulty. It means you will navigate those difficulties more skillfully. And skillful and unskillful are such key words for us as we navigate this human realm and we deal with, I want this, I don't want that. How come this person has this and I don't? What is happening? So it's all about the skillful and unskillful application, specifically skillful application of our teachings, right? We cling to sensual pleasures, views, rituals, and observances and thoughts of who we are. And we've heard different people throughout the season express that to us in different ways. For example, Mary Stankiewicz really told us some great stories about her clinging to, herself as an archaeologist and how that did and did not sometimes serve her and help her. And, she's more than that, just like any of us are more than these roles and titles that are bestowed upon us or that we bestow upon ourselves. And rituals, I shared with my family's preference for lack of ritual around burials. And that lack of ritual may have been helpful to me, but less helpful to others. In terms of craving, we crave forms, sounds, odors, flavors, tangible objects, mind objects. And when feelings arise, cravings arise. That doesn't mean that we cut off feelings. So the point of our practice isn't to cut off feelings, because if there's no feelings, there's no craving. It is knowing that when cravings arise, feelings arise. And so what can we do? I think I just said that backwards. When feelings arise, cravings arise. Pardon me, everyone. And so what can we do? We can be aware. We can watch those feelings come up and understand the cravings that they lead to. And when we develop that understanding, that awareness of, oh, I'm having this feeling, and sometimes when I have this feeling, it leads me to not having sympathetic joy for others. Maybe this feeling leads me to feeling jealous that something's unfair and I want what someone else wants. Or maybe this feeling comes up and I know that I'm not going to feel well and I don't want that. Awareness, this is my step, right? My first step is this understanding and this awareness. So I don't cut off the feeling. I recognize it and I sit with it. Okay, what about aversion? When we experience aversion and push away, usually aggressively pushing something away, mentally or physically, the things that we dislike, pushing away the things we dislike, aversion refers to feelings of aggression. It can be anger, it can be hatred, because again, it's not just like, oh, I don't like that. It's this aggressive, I don't want that. Get that away from me. That better not happen to me. So with that thought in mind, let's revisit part of the Itivuka. Aversion causes harm. Aversion provokes the mind. People don't realize it. As a danger born from within, a person when aversion doesn't know his own welfare. Or I should say, a person when aversive doesn't know his own welfare. So when I'm stuck in that, get that away from me, I don't want that, pushing it away, I don't know my own welfare. And what comes next, which has to do with me not knowing my own welfare, when aversive doesn't see Dhamma. So when I'm full of aversion, I'm not making the best physical and spiritual care of myself, and I'm not able to comprehend the Dhamma. And that means no release from suffering, right? Another passage from the Itivuka. There are these 3 roots of what is unskillful. Which 3? Greed as a root of what is unskillful, aversion as a root of what is unskillful. What is unskillful? Delusion is a root of what is unskillful. So we've got greed, aversion, delusion. These are the 3 roots of what is unskillful. And yet another passage. One whose passion, aversion, and ignorance are washed away has crossed over this ocean with its sharks, demons, dangerous waves, so hard to cross. So hard to cross. So let's not give ourselves grief over the challenges we may face in our practices. Because it says hard to cross. It doesn't say impossible to cross. And it's so important for us to remember that and to stick with it. And then to remember, remember I said skillful and unskillful? It's really important to remember skillful versus unskillful. This is such a useful and helpful word. It's not wrong to want something. And you've heard in discussion with our teachers, here on the podcast, you're going to have human relationships. You're going to want to eat. You're going to want to stay hydrated. Please do those things and sleep. It's the lobha, the greed. And Dave Smith introduced us to this. He said, it's the greed. When we are coming from a place of greed, that is what is unskillful attachment or unskillful desire. When you have enough and you want more. When you hoard items that could benefit others. Specifically, you'll never go through everything you have, but you cling to it. No, I can't give away those 10 cans of beans because I might need them one day. You're never going to be able to eat them all, but you don't give them away. And then you buy more and you don't share. That's greed. That is unskillful. Or you come to want something, so intensely that you lie or cheat or steal to get it. That is clearly unskillful. That is greed. To be unaccepting of impermanence and relentlessly wishing for your time with your loved ones, to be unending. That's greed, right? Our time is not going to go on forever. We are all going to experience impermanence. And we want to find a way to come to a place of equanimity where we can enjoy time with the ones we love and understand that one day, it will be time to let go. So we have a lot going on with all this greed, anger, and delusion. Again, that's part of being human. It doesn't mean we stay this way. It just means this is what we are navigating. The teachings do not say never want something. It's how you crave or create clinging. And for most of us on the path who are yet to be enlightened, like me, we will probably have experiences of greed. Well, the way to overcome greed is generosity. For all of us in thinking about this, where do we start? Start with recognition. Understand that part of our challenge in being human is that we will have the truth of suffering, and that the truth of the suffering is that it comes from our unskillful roots of anger, greed, and delusion, right? Or in other words, we'll say clinging, craving, and attachment. And yet we are fortunate because in this human life, This is the best possible rebirth, is to be a human. And this is where you can do the work. This is where you have access to the Dhamma. And that's where we can do our work to release ourselves from suffering. So watch what arises, the feelings that come up, when and how, and seek to be non-judgmental and compassionate of yourself. Work on those roots like a gardener skillfully tending to his or her plot. No anger or surprise at what has rooted in the garden patch. Just find it, analyze it, and use the right tool, or in this case, the right antidote. For example, love with greed, love with anger, and generosity with greed. I would love to hear from you, your thoughts, your suggestions, your own stories about attachment. So follow this link, I'm going to read it to you in a minute here, to leave me a 90-second message with your ideas and suggestions. You can go to https://www.speakpipe.com/death_Dhamma_podcast. I suppose you could also just use your favorite search engine to say SpeakPipe Death Dhamma Podcast. And there you can record an audio message for me. And be sure to come over to margaretmaloney.com. That's MargaretMeloni.com and join the community. You've been listening to the Death Dhamma Podcast with your host, Margaret Maloney. Thank you so much for being here. Come find me on margaretmaloney.com, MargaretMeloni.com. And until we meet again, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be at ease, and may you be free from suffering. Bye for now.